Compound lifts versus isolation exercises, a debate that you've heard since you started lifting, except the answer has always been the same: focus on compound movements. But what if I told you that isolation exercises are more important than you think? While I'm not advocating random exercises that simply fatigue your muscles without providing any real stimulus, the right isolation exercises in the right amount are crucial for maximizing your results in the gym. In this video, I'm going to share the top 10 isolation exercises everyone should be doing. But before we jump into those exercises, let's first go over why isolation movements are important to begin with. Number 1, better mind-muscle connection. If you're performing a common multi-joint lift like the bench press, for example, it may be hard to feel the movement in your chest. For years, bodybuilders like Arnold talked about the mind-muscle connection, but now we actually have research supporting that focusing on feeling a muscle enhances muscle growth. So if you're having trouble feeling a muscle, incorporating isolation exercises that allow you to better activate or target that muscle would be a good idea. Number 2, more volume with less fatigue. Because compound lifts include multiple muscle groups, they can be far more taxing on the body, making them harder to recover from. So although it may be easy to add a few sets on the bench press, push for a few more reps, or add some weight to the bar in the beginning, there will come a time where it won't be practical. Fortunately, including a few sets of chest flies to add more volume is a lot easier on your body than doing another few sets on the bench press. Number 3, you're only as strong as your weakest link. We are all genetically predisposed to building strength and or size faster in some muscle groups than in others. This can lead to strength deficiencies in a muscle that contributes to a specific lift or to the underdevelopment of a given muscle. For example, during the bench press, you're working the chest, shoulders, and triceps. But what happens when the triceps are the weakest link and fatigue first? Well, the chest isn't going to be completely stimulated. This is where isolation exercises come into play. In this case, they can be used to strengthen the weak link or the triceps, allowing you to adequately stimulate your chest during the bench press. Now that you understand why isolation exercises are important, how much of them should you do? Personally, I recommend that compound movements make up at least 70% of your training, while isolation exercises make up the rest. Without further ado, here are the top 10 isolation exercises everyone should be performing. Exercise number 1, hamstring curl. One study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research compared the stiff-legged deadlift and the lying leg curl. While most people would probably assume that the stiff-legged deadlift would produce better results, in reality, the lying leg curl was specifically better at hitting the lower hamstring. The reason is simple: the hamstrings cross both the hips and the knee. When you perform Romanian deadlifts, the hamstrings are stretched at the knee but shortened at the hips. Basically, most of the tension is going to the upper hamstring glute area. That's why it's important to keep some type of leg curl variation in your program. Exercise number 2, lat pull-in. For most people, it's extremely difficult to feel their lats during back exercises like rows or even lat pull-downs, which is why I recommend some form of activation exercise that allows us to better feel the lat muscles working. We know that the lats are responsible for shoulder adduction or pulling your arm closer to the body, as well as lateral flexion or bending to the side. The lat pull-in involves both of these movements, making it a perfect exercise for isolating and activating the lats. If you're having trouble feeling your lats during your back training, I recommend adding a few sets of lat pull-ins to activate the lats. If, on the other hand, you simply just need more volume, this exercise can be added to the end of your back workout. Exercise number 3, straight arm pull down. Another lat exercise I recommend including is the straight arm pull down. Rather than shoulder adduction, we're focusing on shoulder extension or pulling the arms down. Unlike almost any other back exercise, you won't be bending your elbows during this movement, which completely removes any help from the biceps. The best way to do the straight arm pull down is to keep your arms relatively straight and your shoulders depressed as you pull down. At the very end, puff out your chest and stand up a bit straighter as you basically row the cable towards your hips. Once you feel that deep contraction, bring the cable back up to the starting position and repeat. Exercise number 4, leaning cable lateral raise. We already know that the lateral raise hits the mid-delts, which are otherwise an understimulated muscle. The issue with the traditional dumbbell variation is the resistance curve. At the bottom, there is very little tension. As you lift the dumbbell up, the tension increases. Another thing is that the mid-delts aren't even the dominant muscle during the first 15 degrees of the movement. Instead, it's a rotator cuff muscle called the supraspinatus. So how do we fix these two issues? It's simple. First, use a cable. This provides consistent tension throughout the entire range of motion. Second, start from a leaning position. This way, the starting position already involves the mid-delts rather than the supraspinatus bearing the load. Exercise number 5, Bayesian curls. Like the hamstrings, the biceps are biarticular, meaning they cross two joints, the shoulder and the elbow, which is why the position of your arm matters when training your biceps. For example, if your arm is in front of your body, you'll be emphasizing the short head of your biceps. If your arm is behind the body, you'll hit more of the long head. The long head tends to be completely ignored, so the Bayesian curl is a great solution. Now, when you do a standard cable curl, there's usually less tension in the cable depending on how the machine is set up. The tension really increases when you've already pulled on the cable a bit. With a Bayesian curl, you will only use one arm and face away from the cable column. If you step out a bit further, you'll place tension on the cable before starting the lift. This will ensure there's constant tension throughout the entire movement, and due to the cable pulling your arm back, your arm will start behind your body, which means more long head activation. Exercise number 6, unilateral triceps extension. Because the long head of the triceps, the largest of the three heads, actively crosses the shoulder joint, it's also involved in shoulder extension. That said, if you want to emphasize this head of the triceps while also efficiently hitting the other two heads, you want to place your shoulder into a degree of shoulder flexion. Exercises such as skull crushers and French presses are great for putting an emphasis on the long head due to the degree of shoulder flexion. Personally, I suggest going into a greater degree of shoulder flexion by performing a standing overhead variation with a cable. My variation of choice would be the unilateral overhead triceps extension. Not only will this have the long head in a stretched position at the bottom of the rep, there will also be tension at the top of the rep due to the cable's resistance profile. Exercise number 7, cable crossover. Like we talked about earlier, the bench press may be limited by your tricep strength. If you want to focus on the pecs, then the cable crossover will take virtually every other muscle out of the movement. This is often compared to the dumbbell fly. With a dumbbell fly, most of the tension is created at the deep stretch in the bottom of the movement. Considering gravity can only point straight down, as you lift the dumbbells up, the chest becomes less and less active. A cable crossover doesn't have this issue. Due to its resistance profile, the chest is under tension throughout the entire range of motion. Not only that, but it's a great way to add more volume to your chest training without taxing your body or hindering your ability to recover. Exercise number 8, standing calf raises. The calves have two major muscles, the smaller soleus and the larger gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius crosses the knee and ankle, but the soleus only crosses the ankle. When you do seated calf raises, the gastrocnemius is in a weakened position and can't create as much tension, so the soleus takes over. Unfortunately, the soleus is relatively small and doesn't really contribute to calf size. If you really want to grow your calves, I recommend focusing on a standing variation where your legs are straight. This will ensure that you're targeting the muscle in your calves responsible for calf size, the gastrocnemius. Not only that, but because the gastrocnemius is more active during this movement, overload becomes far easier. To put it simply, if you want to build bigger calves, train them using a straight leg variation and focus on progression. Exercise number 9, barbell shrugs. While you're already going to hit your traps during deadlifts, if you're not happy with your trap growth, it's a good idea to include some barbell shrugs. That said, research has proven that having your arms in a degree of abduction rather than directly at your sides leads to a greater degree of upper trap activation. And since the trap fibers run more diagonal and not just up and down, it also makes sense to lean forward a bit. This is why I recommend a snatch grip barbell shrug where you're leaning slightly forward. Exercise number 10, hip thrust. Finally, we have an exercise that I can almost guarantee you're not doing, especially if you're a male. The hip thrust technically can involve the quads a bit, however, the major area you're hitting is the hips. So if you want strong, masculine glutes, the thrust is a must. In fact, research shows that the hip thrust is one of the best, if not the best, exercises to hit the glutes. To perform this exercise, place your shoulder blades on a bench and have the bar placed across your pelvis. Grip the bar tightly to ensure it's stable, brace your core, drive through your heels, and squeeze your glutes to lift your hips. At this point, your shins should be perpendicular to the floor and your shoulders and knees should be in line. Bring the bar back down under control and repeat. So, there you have it, the top 10 isolation exercises everyone should be doing. Yes, compound exercises should make up the majority of your training, but isolation exercises supply the remaining pieces of the puzzle that is your physique. Did you find this video helpful? If so, click the like button below as it'll truly help out the channel. Tell me, what isolation exercise would you add to this list and why? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you want more science-based videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel and do not forget to turn on post notifications so you never miss another video. I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.